This is the Read, Write, and Create podcast, the podcast where you get a bite-sized session of creative writing coaching from me, Lori L. Tharps. I'm an award-winning author of both fiction and nonfiction, a journalist, and a former college professor. I've spent more than 20 years writing, teaching, and coaching creative writers, so I created this podcast because I want to help as many BIPOC writers as possible get their stories out of their heads and into the world. Are you ready? Let's go. On episode 31 of the podcast, I have saved the best for last. Our final interview this season is with the incomparable American Book Award-winning author, Bernice McFadden. Bernice McFadden is the author of over a dozen books. Her latest novel, Praise Song for the Butterflies, was longlisted for the 2019 Women's Prize in Fiction. Her novel, The Book of Harlan, won the 2017 American Book Award and the 2017 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work. The New York Times selected her novel, Gathering of Waters, as one of the 100 notable books of 2012 and as an editor's choice pick. She also penned the novel Glorious, a finalist for the NAACP Image Award and featured in O, the Oprah magazine. McFadden is also a 4-time Hurston Wright Legacy Award finalist and a recipient of 3 awards from the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. Currently, Bernice McFadden is an assistant professor of English at Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana. During our wonderful conversation, Bernice and I discuss her incredible career that spans decades. We talk about the highs and the lows and how she managed to keep writing even when faced with multiple rejections and editors telling her that there was no market for Black authors writing literary fiction. Ha! We laugh at that. We scoff at that. Included in this discussion, we also talk about the how and the why she decided to start writing humorous erotica under the pen name Geneva Holliday. We also talk about the surprise she received from Toni Morrison early in her career and the role that spirit and synchronicity have played in her writing practice. I know you're going to enjoy this interview and hopefully come away as inspired and motivated as I was while talking with Bernice. So let me stop going on and let's get to the conversation. Welcome to the Read, Write, and Create podcast, Bernice McFadden.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. I am super excited, and I'm going to just let everybody listening know I am such a fangirl of your work. I hope that I do not embarrass myself during the time of this interview. I always like to tell people why I have the guests on. And besides the fact that I'm just, literally created this podcast just so I have an excuse to ask you every question I've ever wanted to ask you before, your career as a writer, Bernice, is so inspirational. The amount of work that you've put out, but also knowing the kind of ups and downs that you've weathered in the publishing industry are so instructive and motivating for emerging writers right now. So I really wanted to have you on so people could really see what a literary life looks like, the good, the bad, the ugly, and how one pivots, rolls with the punches, and stays in the game. So all that as a setup, my first question for you is, can you just tell our listeners kind of the origin story of your writing career? I have to say I did a little digging and I read something that said you wanted to start a career in fashion. Maybe you had some corporate lifestyle there, and then there was like a 75 rejection letters before you got your first book deal. So can you just kind of paint the picture for how did Bernice McFadden become a writer in terms of that first book?
I mean, I decided I wanted to be a writer at the age of 9, but I didn't have any models. And in my 9-year-old mind, I had heard about Black writers, but I'm like, they're all dead. They died after the Harlem Renaissance. This is my child's mind. And I don't remember at all reading any books by Black authors before The Color Purple in 1983. And at that point, I was 17 years old and out of high school. My dream of becoming a writer had put that on the back burner because, again, I didn't have any role models. So while I was in high school, I fell in love with sewing. And I guess I thought of myself as a little bit of a fashionista. I was far from it. So when I started applying for colleges, that was my focus. So I applied to Laboratory Institute of Merchandising and the Fashion Institute. And Fashion Institute said, no, thank you. So I did a year at LIM. I did halfway decently the first semester, and the second semester I flunked out altogether. And I knew that that wasn't for me. So I was working in retail, and I had started writing again because now I was aware that there were Black writers, and I was actively reading Black writers. So I started writing again, and I was working on this short story that would become the novel Sugar, my first novel, Sugar. But in the meantime, I went back to school because I knew to climb the corporate ladder, I needed to have a degree. So I enrolled in Fordham University, and I was taking liberal arts classes. And that's where I took my very first creative writing workshop. That was with Professor Lamb, God rest her soul. And at the end of that first semester, she came to me and she was like, you are really a wonderful writer. I don't know why you're not published. This was a woman who had published, I think at the time, it was like 3 or 4 books. And she's looking at my work saying, you need to be published. So I really started investing in myself and sending out query letters to publishers, to agents, because I'm like, this woman said that I could write. But it was just rejection letter after rejection letter after rejection letter. But during that time, I was working in the travel and tourism industry. So I was traveling the world, which is a thing that I still love to do. And I just, I kept at it. There were days when I was like, well, maybe this is not for me. But those days were few and far between because it was in my gut. It was in my soul. I was like, I'm supposed to be doing this. And I always had an attitude at every job I worked. My managers, I wasn't a bad worker, right? But, when they would give us our little 2% increase or 3, whatever it was, they wanted me to, shuck and jive and juggle and just be gleeful about it. And I was just like, oh, thank you. I'm not going to be here next year. Yeah, so finally, after almost a decade, and yes, 75 plus rejection letters, I only kept 75 of those rejection letters. I finally got a book deal in 1999.
Just out of curiosity, Bernice, why did you keep the rejection letters? What was that about for you?
I'm all about keepsakes and scrapbooking and just being able to go back and look over my life. One of the things that I'm so thankful for is that my paternal grandmother, she kept a trunk full of stuff that chronicled her life and the lives of her parents. And that was so important to me. It remains important to me. And so I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about my descendants. I want them to have these things. That's why I started keeping the rejection letters.
I have my journals from when I was my first journal when I was 5 or 6. And my daughter loves to read it. She loves to read what I was thinking when I was 7 years old. I think maybe that's a writer thing. We understand how important it is to document our lives, especially people of color, where our lives have so often been erased or, not important enough for anybody to document. So, all right. So your first novel comes out, Sugar. And then you go, from there, it feels like gangbusters. You got amazing reviews. I know that, I think it was your third book, The Warmest December. Is it that Toni Morrison wrote a handwritten letter to say how much she enjoyed it?
Yes. Yeah.
What does that feel like when Toni Morrison says, oh, let me just write in here and tell this young woman that I loved her work?
Yes, sometimes I'll go back and just reread it because I'm like, this really happened, right? I'm not making it up. So the way I found out was my editor called me up And she was like, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm sitting in front of the computer. And she said, oh, okay, so you're sitting. And I was like, yeah, I'm sitting. And she's like, I want to read you something. So she read it. And I was like, oh, that's so beautiful. Who sent that in? And she was like, Toni Morrison. And I was like, who? Like, Toni Morrison. Somebody named with the same name as Toni Morrison, not the Toni Morrison. She's like the Toni Morrison, Bernice. And I just wept. And I hadn't met her at that point. I would meet her a few years later, but that was just, what a gift.
Completely. So at that point, once you had your agent and you started writing, you were writing novels, did it feel like the dream had come true? The 9-year-old Bernice had hit the pinnacle, was living the life that you had thought a novelist would be leading?
Yes, but it was also very scary, I will tell you, because once I got the deal, I started thinking about all the things that could happen to me before the book actually hit the bookshelves. So I got the deal in like May. The book was published in January of 2000. And I worried myself. I literally worried myself sick. Like I lost 15 pounds. That summer in Manhattan, because I used to work in Lower Manhattan, there were 2 incidents where like a scaffolding fell and killed a woman. And then, I don't know, a brick fell off. So this is in my head now. I'm walking the streets because I raised Catholic. And, this guilt that comes along with that, like, I didn't deserve it. I knew I deserved it, but there was that person in my ear saying, this is not going to happen because you don't deserve this. You're going to die before. This is what I went through. Like, I had to get on medication. It was that bad. But then I got over that hump. The first book came out, but then there was, The Warmest December was my second book, not my third. So now I'm, halfway through writing The Warmest December. And the other thing that's in my ear now is like, that sophomore book. Ooh, that sophomore book, that's where either you're going to make it or it's going to break you, right? And so I remember how I delivered that book. So now everything is via email. But back in the day, back in the older days, we'd mail it in, right? I would hand deliver my manuscript in. I wrote that book very quickly. And I remember I didn't have the proper envelope. So I kind of like taped some stuff together. It was terrible. I was out of my mind. And I took it in. I took it into Dutton on Hudson Street and just kind of like threw it at the receptionist and went home. And I think 2 days later, I got on a plane and went someplace. Like I probably went to Barbados or something. And they called me. My editor called me maybe a week later, and she was like, I read this. I loved it. She said, I cried over this book. And then the Toni Morrison thing happened. So, yeah, from The Warmest December on, now I'm just like, okay, this is life. This is working for me.
So at that point, did you still keep your 9 to 5, or were you writing?
When I got my book deal in May, and they got my 2-week notice. I was done.
So you were like, I'm a writer now.
I'm a writer, yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk more about the glory of being a writer, but I do know that there came a point when, like, after several books that you had written, Toni Morrison's telling you you're the greatest, but then there comes a point in your life, in your writing career, where you are struggling to get the next book deal. And I think that's like 10 years down the line, though. Maybe I'm stretching that a little bit. I'm not sure. But can you talk about Geneva Holliday and this point in your life? Because this is the part that I feel like when I'm trying to inspire my writers, I'll be like, let me tell you about Bernice McFadden, okay? She didn't say, never mind, I gave up. No, she figured out how to stay in the game by reinventing herself. So can you talk a little bit about this kind of, I want to call it like this sophomore or stage 2 part of your career? Because I feel like your career has these different phases. So tell the people, Bernice, what I'm talking about.
So, okay. Groove was the first novel I wrote under the pseudonym Geneva Holliday, but it was actually a book I had started writing while I was sending out Sugar, while I was trying to get Sugar published, because there was this thing that had happened in the 90s, right? You know, we had this huge influx of Black writers because Terry McMillan like opened this door, and suddenly publishers like, oh yes, Black people read. So let's find Black authors to publish. So there became the thing called the Tony Terry problem. Either you're writing like Terry McMillan or you're writing like Toni Morrison, right? And they were like, we already have our Toni Morrison, so we don't need any more of that. And basically it was saying literary fiction. They wanted mainstream commercial fiction because Terry had done so well. And obviously the person who came behind her, Eric Jerome Dickey, like they just wanted the same type of formula. And I wasn't writing in that genre. So I said, okay, maybe I should, just to get my foot in the door. That was my thought. But luckily, Sugar was finally picked up. So in 2004, I showed the manuscript to my agent. And he was like, oh, this is fun. He's like, so you don't want to publish this? And I was like, you think I should? He was like, absolutely. I was like, okay. But I decided I would publish it under a pseudonym because I did not want my fan base to be confused, because it's humorous erotica. That is not for everyone. So I have people who really enjoy Geneva Holliday and not really crazy about Bernice McFadden, vice versa, and then readers who enjoy both. So when that first book got published in 2005, I was still being published as Bernice McFadden, but I could see the writing on the wall. They were like, well, you know, you didn't sell X, Y, and Z and this, that, and the other. So the Geneva Holliday money came in handy when Dutton stopped publishing me. I think the last book they published was 2006. Yeah, I think it was Nowhere is a Place was the last book they published. So then I'm publishing as Geneva Holliday up until 2009. And then I didn't have any more book. I would get a book deal from a small press, but meaning the money. So the small press, I was not getting any major money. And then the market crashed in 2008 and wiped me out. And yeah, it was bad. It was terrible.
So, and again, because I've been a fan of yours forever and I've been watching your career, like I remember you talking about this. Kind of give us a little bit of an idea of like mentally, did you think like your writing career was over? Like what were the things that were going through your mind when all of these things are happening at the same time in terms of the publishing industry, but also just the economy and everything else? Did you think, all right, I'm going to go back to the travel industry and just like that was the end of my literary life? Or did you just think I got to figure something else out? What was your mindset at that time?
I thought, yes, I'm going to have to go back to work. I'm not going to stop writing. Like, I just need money coming in while I ride this out. I was like, this is a bump in the road. I was taking it really, really hard, right? Because I'm like, I'm going to lose my house. I had 2 houses. I was like, I'm going to lose my house. It was so, so bad. It was such a terrible time. But I never, ever thought I'm not going to write anymore. Never. That never crossed my mind. It was like, okay, Bernice, you're going to have to pivot. You're going to have to do something different for maybe a year, maybe 2 years while you get this next book done. And then you can go back to your writer's life. I always knew that I would continue writing. But for me, it was starting all over again. So at the time, I was trying to find a home for my novel, Glorious. And I have rejection letters from editors that were like, basically telling me my career was over. Yeah. Like, yeah, nobody's going to publish this. Oh, we really loved her past work. But there, again, it was back to there's no audience for this book. And this is what agents and editors were saying about Sugar. There's no audience for this book. And I was like, there's an audience for this book.
And you're saying that just to make everybody's keeping up, there's no audience for this literary fiction written by a Black person that happens to be featuring a Black main character.
Right. A Black writer during the Harlem Renaissance. So I was like, okay. So big publishing was like, nope, sorry, bye. So I started looking at small publishers. And I sent it to Akashic Books, founded and run by Johnny Temple. And he sent me a lovely email. He was like, I'm going to read it and get back to you. And I said, okay. And I was just sending it out.
Without an agent, not an agent. You're sending it out yourself.
I'm sending it out on my own. I don't have an agent at this point. So then I went to the Harlem Book Fair and I walked over to the table. There was this white man standing behind a table of books, and the books on the table were Elizabeth Nunez's. So I know Elizabeth. So I walked over and I was like, oh, because I hadn't seen her in a minute. I was like, oh, Elizabeth has a new book. And he was like, yes. He said, I'm publishing her. And I was like, oh, who are you? And he said, Johnny Temple. I was like, oh, Akashic Books. And he was like, and you are? I said, Bernice McFadden. So he was like, oh, we talked a little bit. And he goes, listen, he said, I read your novel and I really like it. He said, but there are 3 other people who need to love the book as well in my publishing company. He goes, so I don't want to give you any false hope. And I was like, what I've been through, you can't. Because in my mind, I was like, I'm going to self-publish. That was going to be my next step. And so, said goodbye. And then 2 weeks later, I was going to Ohio for an event. And I woke up that morning and the voice in my head was like, no, before you go to the airport, you have to go to the cemetery. The cemetery is not too far away from where I used to live. And I was like, why do I have to go to the cemetery? And it was like, well, Nella Larson is buried there and you need to go and say thank you. And I was like, okay. So I called up my good friend who lived across the street from me at the time. We went to the cemetery, drove around, took a minute to find her grave. And I had brought with me some shells. And I said, thank you. And I left the shells because Easter is a mixture of Nella Larson and Zora Neale Hurston.
Easter being the character from Glorious.
Glorious, yes. Inspired by both of them, by their lives. And I went to Ohio, and when I came back, there was an email saying, we want this book from Johnny Temple.
I have 2 follow-up questions to that, and it's in people's minds. So you got, this, I have to go say thank you to Nella Larson. The story is a combination. The main character is a mix inspired by Zora Neale Hurston, Nella Larson. Where do your story ideas come from? Because, it's only been about 20 minutes into this conversation, and you've mentioned humorous erotica, you've mentioned literary fiction, you've mentioned Nella Larson, the Harlem Renaissance. Like, one of the reasons I love your books is because they all feel like they're mildly grounded in reality, and yet they're wholly original stories. So, and I also know that sometimes they're even inspired by some of your family members, because I know you're really into the genealogy. So where do your stories come from? And again, remember, I want to know this, and our emerging writers listening also, how do you get your story ideas?
A lot of times it's a very mystical, magical thing for me, right? With Glorious, literally, I had some friends over, and this is when I was living in my brownstone, and the kitchen was on the bottom floor on the garden level. So my friends had left. I came downstairs and I was washing the dishes. And it's not like seeing the way we're seeing each other. I don't even know how to explain it, but maybe more like sensing. I'm sensing Nella Larson and Zora Neale Hurston sitting at the kitchen table having tea as I'm washing dishes. And they're having tea and they're like, so you have to write this story about us. And I'm like, okay. And that's how it came. And I think that night I probably just went up and wrote maybe 5 pages, not knowing where it's going. And I rarely know where the story is going. My stories are character driven. And so for me, I think if you have really strong characters, the plot is just going to holistically come about. And that's usually how it is with all of my books, except the Geneva Holliday books. Like, I know where I'm going with that. And I'm using events and incidents from my friends' lives and my life and just making it really outrageous. So that's a different type of writing. But when I write as Bernice McFadden, it's very spiritual. I'm not sitting around looking for stories. The stories always find me. Now, with Praise Song for the Butterflies, I'd gone to Ghana in 2007. And it was a big group, National Book Club Conference. We had all gone down. So one of the excursions was to a rehab center for these formerly enslaved girls and women, Tricosi. And when the ladies came back from that, they were just like so overwhelmed and very sad that this was a thing in Ghana. And they were like, Bernice, you should write a story about this. And I was like, yeah, that's not how it works. Right? That's not how it works. So that was 2007 when we went. And maybe, I don't know when I did write a story, maybe 2010 or 11 about it, because I started thinking about it out of the blue. I just started thinking about it. Then I started doing some research and I did write a story and I just self-published it. I just put it on Amazon. And then when I moved down here to New Orleans, I started thinking about it again. And I showed it to Johnny and he was like, oh yeah, I like this. And I said, wait a minute, let me go back and rework it because it's different now. There's something that's different with this story. And I'm really proud of that story. But it took years. I had to think about it for years before I actually put it down on the page.
Yeah. So I have a list of all the books you've ever written in the years they came out. That came out in 2018, Praise Song for the Butterflies. So that was like almost a decade for it to marinate and to fully, I don't know, self-actualize, if you will. Writers, if you're listening, like, don't feel like you have to force a story. Sometimes it just has to sit with you. And the good thing about that is if it has sat with you for like years, usually when you sit down to write, it just comes out. You're not struggling because it's literally all kind of downloaded already and you're just letting it out. So the idea that you have to rush a story is, it's easy to understand why you might feel that way in today's society. But I think letting a story develop first before you try to get it down makes it for easier writing practice. All right. So going back to this Johnny Temple, Akashic Books, what was that publishing experience like? Because you had been published with bigger publishers and here you are working with, at the time, it was relatively new, small independent publisher. Johnny Temple is a white man. I know he is beloved by many. I love him from a distance. And I say that only because I don't know him personally, but I just think what he did with creating his publishing company and bringing a lot of writers an opportunity is amazing. And I'm so happy that his company still exists. And I don't know if it's growing, but I mean, he's still publishing amazing things in his anthologies, the noir series and everything. Like so many people have gotten published through his company. So what was the difference in, I don't know, pros, cons, working with a smaller independent publisher, especially because you can compare the two, working with larger publishers?
Let me tell you something. Johnny and his staff, they are amazing, wonderful people. I can't say one negative thing about that experience. What I appreciated is that the things that people in big publishing didn't tell me, Johnny told me. It explained things. Instead of gaslighting me, he was like, well, no, Bernice, we can't put you in the airport bookstores because it's pay to play. That costs money. So all these things that cost money, I was like, oh, they could have just said that. But they didn't say that because that would mean, right? Well, why are you paying for so-and-so and not me? So that's why I wasn't told that. So I learned a lot being with Johnny. The other thing was small press, hands-on. I could send an email 10 o'clock at night, somebody's answering. Somebody's going to answer that email. I was involved in everything. The cover. Big publisher never asked me what I thought. They were like, here's the cover. We hope you like it. And so we worked together. It was a partnership. Oh, it's a 50-50 royalty split. So even though the advance is very small, if you sell well, and I sold well with Johnny, you get a nice check twice a year. So yeah, it was a very wonderful experience, and I would go back to Johnny and work with him again. Absolutely.
I don't mean to make you say bad things about people, but I do feel like, for the people, those editors who were like, there's no audience for this type of work and wouldn't give you that second chance. And then you get the American Book Award with the Book of Harlan. And was that also on Akashic? Is it Akashic?
Akashic.
How'd that feel,
let me
Bernice?
just say something else. Going back to Glorious, which was the first book that Akashic published. Johnny published that in paperback, right? Because he's like, maybe. I love it, but... And it sold so well. He was like, God damn it. I should have published this in hardcover. But 10 years later, which celebrated its 10th anniversary, he reissued it in hardcover.
Who does that?
Johnny Temple. I had some editors say to me, this is crazy. I'm nervous. I think 2 editors. I'm always nervous about books about writers. I was like, what?
I mean, if they're boring,
Yeah.
but that could be a book about a stripper. You give a boring stripper. Come on now.
Yeah. Just ridiculous. But listen, I think everything happens for a reason. And my cousin, my Bayesian cousin has a wonderful saying. She says, a bad don't happen. So things that we are considering bad things, no, it's not a bad thing. You needed this thing to happen to move to the next level. I needed that to happen. I wasn't writing, when I was with Dutton, I was writing a book a year, churning them out. But I was getting older, and I think the subject matter was getting deeper, and I had to spend more time researching, and I had to spend more time allowing the book to marinate, as you said. The Book of Harlan, I started thinking about that book back in like 2004, 5 or 6, between 2004 and 2006. It didn't get published until 2016. It took me 4 years to write. Once I started writing, it took me 4 years.
Well, that book is an epic story. I would assume that would have taken you a decade to write. It was so intricate. There were so many, I don't even remember this when it starts, but we go through World War II. We end up in the Newark riots in New Jersey. Like, it's the Harlem Renaissance. Like, it is an epic story, and it fully deserves the American Book Award, and it's incredible. It is my favorite Bernice McFadden book.
Thank you.
Followed by Glorious, by the way.
Thank you.
As I was preparing for this, I'm looking at the list of the books, and I was like, I've read almost every single one of Bernice McFadden's books. Like, whenever somebody says, who's your favorite author? I'm like, I just like so many people. But I don't know if there's any other author that I can be like, oh yeah, I've pretty much read everything that they've written. That's why I said, I see it slipping out. My fangirling is happening right now. But let's be serious. But let's just go back to that. What was it like to win the American Book Award? I mean, that feels like a pretty awesome award. And I believe you won the NAACP award for that same year, right?
It was an amazing year. I don't know. I go to these things, I accept my awards, and it's just like, oh, this is the thing that I dreamt about when I was a young person, and it's actually happening. And I think it has a lot to do with manifesting. Write down what you want and write it down in such a way that you already have it. You've already had those experiences, and just be grateful in the moment. Be like, I'm grateful for this. You may not have it physically, but it's coming. It's like opening up a door in the universe. And the thing that you think about, that you ponder on, the universe will give it to you. So you have to be careful about the things you think about. When things were horrible for me back in 2008, 2009, that's all I could think about. I'm going to lose my house. And so the universe says, she wants to lose her house. We better make sure she loses. Give that to her. She keeps thinking about it. So Yeah, I was like, after that, I said, okay, Bernice, be careful about your thoughts. Just be very careful about your thoughts. So yeah, that's my religion now.
So, going to jump into a little bit of technical stuff. So, we know now that you are a professor at Tulane University. Do you like teaching? And does that give you the time and space to write? Or is it now difficult to balance your teaching responsibilities with your writing? Because I know a lot of people do think that's the goal. Let me get an academic teaching position and then I can write all summer and teach in the fall.
I do enjoy teaching. And I always tell my students, this is an exchange. I don't know everything. You probably know a lot more than I do. So if we're exchanging information. Also, I don't think that you could really teach someone to write creatively, but you can provoke them into writing creatively. And so I bring in all kinds of stuff for them to read. I teach them the way I taught myself how to write. And that was by reading, and then writing and writing and writing. And that's what we do in my classes. Now, I am still struggling to find that balance between teaching and writing. I think it has to do with, one, that I'm now teaching, and two, I'm getting older, which is why I've not published a book since 2018. Maybe just last year, I finally was like, okay, I found the little sweet spot. But again, it took me 3 years to write my memoir. And I have to accept the fact that it's going to take me longer to produce. I'm not 33. I think that's how old I was when I got my first deal. I'm not 33, 34 years old when I could just sit around all day and just write and knock out a book a year. So yeah, I'm grateful that I'm at the institution that I'm at, because when I started the journey of applying for jobs, I hadn't been on an interview in umpteen years. And when I tell you I fumbled the first two terribly, had no idea what they were going to ask. But again, that wasn't for me. Like, I needed to be out of New York. There was a position I really wanted in New York, and they said no. And I was devastated. But in hindsight, I didn't need to be in New York. And the universe put me in a place that it closely reminds me of the Caribbean, which is like my favorite place, right? New Orleans. And it's easy. It's laid back. My job is laid back. I don't have any stress here. So I understand that I'm here so that I can rest.
And I just feel like there's probably a lot of stories that need to be told in New Orleans that you probably are the perfect person to tease some of those out of the shadows, if you will. Before we get to I always like to talk, the last little bit is a little bit about craft. But before we get there, I just had one other question again with this whole, your journey as a writer and how inspirational it is that, in let's say stage 3, stage 2.5, your Sugar was published in the United Kingdom. And I believe more of your books also. And I'm just wondering what that's like to get a whole new audience in another country. Like, what does that feel like? How did that change your perspective as a writer? And also just a little bit of the technical parts of that. Was that something you tried to do, was to get your book published in the UK? Or did it happen kind of by accident or by surprise to you?
So actually, the Book of Harlan was published in the UK, so before Sugar. But when I got this new deal, now I'm coming full circle. I'm back with Dutton. They're publishing my memoir. So they looked at Sugar. Now they reissued it on its 10th anniversary and then the 20th anniversary. So when I got the deal, the UK side of Dutton was like, well, yeah, we're going to reissue this over here as well. And actually, there's something else that's about to happen with Sugar that I can't speak on yet. But it's a very wonderful thing that'll be happening this summer. So that's how it got there. I knew that I was building a little audience over there because I get the emails because of the Book of Harlan. That was the introduction.
because it won so many? I mean, yes, it's wonderful, but is it because of the awards that it won that it got more play, so to speak, do you think? Or was it just because it was on its own merits of just being an awesome book?
On its own merits because it was published over there I can't remember now if it was published before the awards came out over there. It might have been a little bit of both. But Jacaranda Books, another small press, Black female owned, and she's another wonderful person to work with and another person who told me the truth about things. Yeah. I've been very lucky, I got to tell you.
So we're going to wrap this up by talking a little bit about, you already told us about how you get your story ideas, but I'm curious, and again, we love to hear these kind of craft details. Do you have any rituals for when you sit down to write? Do you like candles? Do you have a furry stuffed animal who talks to you, sits on your chair with you? Do you have to be in a special chair in your house? Do you have a bowl of jelly beans, Nutter Butters? We've heard all of these from different writers who have shared. Philip B. Williams eats peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. What, if any, rituals do you have for your writing practice?
The house has to be clean. My work area needs to be clean. I cannot have any distractions. It has to be quiet. I don't write to music. I'm envious about people who can do that or go into like a coffee shop and write. I'm like, how can you do that? I'm eavesdropping. I'm not writing. So no, nothing special, but I will say that I write best when I'm in Brooklyn. So when I do go home on breaks, I'm staying at the house. My mother still lives there, where I wrote my first two novels, Sugar and the Warmest December. And I'm in a different part of the house now, but that's where, I don't know, that's like where the majority of the writing fairies are. And once I get there, it's just like, I flow. I flow so easily. It's not this stop and start sort of thing. But otherwise, no, it just has to be clean.
Like clean as in I use my cleaners on it, or just not messy? Like
no, I've wiped everything down. Everything is tidy. And now we can get to work.
And what personal trait or habit would you say has been the most useful for you as a writer?
Oh, the most trait or habit? Research? Would that count?
I mean, more like you're really tenacious, or you, I don't know, you can go without sleep for 7 days without stopping. I don't know.
I would say, yeah, I think I'm very tenacious. I also feel like I'm an empathetic person, and I think that's really important when you're writing. I could understand both sides of every argument. So yes, I would say my empathy.
And finally, if you had to give one piece of advice, general sense of advice for somebody listening who hasn't gotten that book deal yet, what would you tell them to do about their writing career? What would you offer as advice and or motivation?
Just keep writing, because everything happens in its own time, not in your time. So if this is something that you really want, you're going to be like a dog with a bone, right? You're not going to let it go. This is the thing you want. And no matter how long it takes, you're just going to continue walking that path until you get to that open door. Because I hear people all the time, I submitted 10, 15, 20 queries, and I'm just done with this. I was like, well, you didn't really want it. That was just a phase. That was just a phase. That wasn't your life. This is my life.
People, if you didn't, listen to what she's saying, because she has lived it all. She has done it all. She has waited out the slow times. She has tried different things, and she never gave up. And I loved it when you said, when you weren't getting the deal, you never considered giving up the writing. And I heard you even say, if that wasn't going to happen, you were going to self-publish, because that's what you just have to do to get your work out into the world. So, Bernice, before we let you go, you said you're working on a memoir. Does that memoir have a title, and when can we expect to see it out in the world?
It's actually finished. I have open on my screen the last read through before they go into production. The title is Firstborn Girls, and it's scheduled to come out in the spring of 2025.
Ooh, so soon. Yay. Spring 2025, Firstborn Girls.
And let me tell you something about that. This is my last little magical thing.
Come on, we love the magic. We love the magic.
Everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. So this book originally was supposed to be published in 23, but I was behind and I was behind and I was behind. And so now, like, all right, it's done. It's coming out in 25. And next year I'll turn 60. So it was supposed to come out in 25. Sugar will be celebrating her 25th anniversary. It just all aligned. This is how it was supposed to happen. So I'm thrilled.
Well, I'm thrilled for you. I love it. I love the synchronicity and the magic of that happening just the way it's supposed to happen. Bernice, where can people find or follow you and your work on the World Wide Web?
I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. I don't visit Twitter or X as it's called much anymore. And my website is currently down, but it should be up in the next 30 days.
So we'll put links to all of Bernice's favorite online hangouts so you can follow her. And I do follow her on Facebook, and she's always got something interesting to say for us to think about. She puts up some sermons sometimes, not of her own sermons, but just she finds all the good stuff on the internet and curates it for us. So she's a great person to follow. Thank you so much, Bernice. I appreciate you coming and inspiring us today with your very inspiring literary life.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation, everyone, with Bernice McFadden. She is truly a living literary treasure, and as you can tell, one of my absolute favorite authors. If you haven't read any of her books yet, I don't know what you're waiting for, but I can suggest that you start with The Book of Harlan. It is truly amazing. And in the meantime, here are some takeaways from my conversation with Bernice for you. Number 1, don't think about your rejections and the obstacles in your path as endpoints in your career. Think about them as plot points in your success story that you'll want to remember in the future. Number 2, if you want to be a writer, don't let other people's limiting beliefs limit you getting your work out into the world. Number 3, don't be afraid to take a chance on a small independent publisher. They could be the best thing that ever happens to you and your literary career. Number 4, stories need time to marinate and develop. Do not feel like you have to rush a story to completion. And number 5, if a writing life is what you really want, then pursue it like a dog pursuing a bone. As Bernice said, quote, no matter how long it takes, you're just going to continue walking the path until you get to that open door, unquote. Thank you, Bernice, for your inspiring advice, for your words of wisdom, and for sharing your amazing story with the Read, Write, and Create audience. I hope all of you wordsmiths and sister scribes feel even more encouraged and motivated to keep writing and to get your stories out into the world. Thank you so much for listening to this award-winning podcast. If you're looking for more creative writing inspiration and useful resources for your literary life, then be sure to check out the Read, Write, and Create website. That's at readwriteandcreate.com, REED, writeandcreate.com. And don't forget that we also have a Read, Write, and Create bookshop where we curate titles specifically by BIPOC authors for adults, teens, and children. And when you buy your books at the Read, Write, and Create bookshop, not only are you supporting this podcast, but you are supporting independent bookstores all across the United States. Again, the links for the bookshop are in the show notes. Finally, we would love it if you could leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. These ratings and reviews help the algorithm bring our podcast up to the top when people are searching, and it gives people the idea that people actually like this podcast and it's worth them listening to. So if you could take a moment to leave a rating and review, again, we would very much appreciate it. Thank you. The Read, Write, and Create podcast is written and produced by me, Lori L. Tharps. Our editor is Brad Linder, and our theme music is by Wataboy. I'll be back in 2 weeks on Monday for our final episode of season 3 of the podcast. Until then, keep writing.